As I mentioned, we are at Porter Goss's office. He tells us, although he added he will never say never, that this should be his 16th State of the Union address as Southwest Florida's voice in Washington. As for the speech tonight, it's expected to be a stay-the-course speech. The president emphasizing stay the course on the war in Iraq, the war on terror, and stay the course in the economy. Domestically, there are issues that are of extreme significance in Southwest Florida that he'll address tonight. Health care, tax cuts, expanding NASA, and especially relaxing U.S. immigration policy. After practicing at the White House this week to be his last. And I can tell you personally, this is my first visit to Washington since 9/11, and the security here is absolutely mind-boggling. Washington, D.C. is basically a fortress. There are D.C. police and Capitol Police with very large police dogs practically everywhere you look, gigantic steel barricades rising out of the ground in addition to the concrete barricades, keeping out the possibility of anybody who might want to drive a vehicle into any of these hundreds of historical buildings here in Washington. So it is practically impossible to navigate your way around Washington, D.C. The Capitol building has been locked down for the last hour and 10 minutes. Jessica.
I'm sure an amazing sight. Craig.
Well, we don't think it's a coincidence tonight, but in the past, major events have happened right at the time of State of the Union speeches. You can think back to 1986. Ronald Reagan gave his State of the Union speech the day that the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded. In 1992, President George Bush I, 41, gave his speech right when the Soviet Union had broken up, declaring that communism had fallen. And in 1999, President Clinton gave his State of the Union speech the same week that the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke. This not a coincidence. Most political observers are saying the day after the Iowa caucuses, but in the past, just a series of them. We're live in Washington with photojournalist Todd Offenbeck. I'm Craig Wolf, NBC2 News. Good evening, Jessica and Todd, from a bitterly cold Washington, D.C. For 16 years, Porter Goss has viewed these State of the Union speeches as Southwest Florida's voice in Washington. There's been a presumption that he will be retiring after his term, and it appears that that's a presumption that you can take to the bank. When I walked into his office earlier this afternoon, he was going through some papers with one of his aides to form sort of an archives to provide some history for his 8 terms. That's something that congressmen do when they leave office. He also told me today he filed for Social Security. But the talk quickly got serious with Porter Goss. It turned to 9/11. The events of that day, he told me, wore him out. And his efforts to prevent another terror attack as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, successful so far, have worn him down.
There isn't a day that I don't think. It really does.
And when I asked Congressman Goss really what the reason was for his wanting to retire, he simply said that he is tired. He has ruled out a run for elective office, but that doesn't necessarily mean, Todd and Jessica, that he's retiring from the business of public service. Back to you. That's one of the first questions I asked him. Is it going to be difficult for whoever takes his place to have anywhere near the kind of power that he has here as the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee? He said in due time he feels confident that his successor will have a similar amount of influence. And once again, he feels like that his life in public service is not over. There's still more than he can do. He just won't do it as a U.S. congressman. Reporting from a very chilly Washington with photojournalist Todd Offenbeck, Craig Wolf, NBC2 News. At night, it still looks like the postcard, the Washington, D.C. of old, when it was safer. Under the cover of darkness, the beauty takes over. But when day breaks, you see that the Capitol Hill of today is a long way from the looser, freer, and more innocent times when Porter Goss first went to Washington.
All of this has been accidental, never been a career desire.
But after 8 terms, 16 years as Southwest Florida's voice in Washington, he sits in his modestly appointed office across the street from the Capitol and sees the walls adorned with popes and presidents, home and family.
And in fact, I signed up today for Social Security.
And plans for his future. Whatever it might include, he says running for elective office won't be part of it.
I just believe that it's my time is to step aside and elect a public office for this seat. Somebody else, fresh blood on the Intelligence Committee. Good things to have some fresh blood.
What is it that drove Porter Goss away from the beautiful buildings dripping with history? The Tony townhouses near Capitol Hill. Ironically, it was the event that thrust him into the national spotlight, defined him as a congressman, changed all of our lives, but knocked the wind out of his sails.
A second airplane, a 727 just rammed into the building.
There isn't a day that I don't think about that.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
I keep thinking, you know, is there something we missed? Is there something we should have done different? The answer is no, I don't know, but I don't miss a day. It wears you out. I mean, it really does. I was in the Intelligence Committee with Bob Graham in our committee room having a very discreet, very private breakfast with the Director of Pakistani Intelligence. And staff came in and advised us that a plane had hit the trade towers. We had links with, obviously with the intelligence community, and said we have unaccounted aircraft in airspace headed towards Washington, and we don't know for sure what the targets are. You need to evacuate immediately. And right at the end of the mall, of course, the Pentagon, and the smoke, the plane had just hit the Pentagon, and the smoke was coming up.
A snap decision was made by the Speaker of the House. Open up the House floor, gather available senators and representatives, and pray quickly.
If you look on my wall, that's the prayer. But if you read the prayer very closely, it speaks about the victims in Washington and New York because the third plane hadn't crashed yet.
Several hours after the evacuation, when it was deemed safe for lawmakers to return to Washington, Goss headed back to Capitol Hill in the Speaker's helicopter.
As we flew down, we came into the site, you saw that dome, and it just sits out at such a huge target. And think, oh boy, are we glad to see that's still there.
Even with all the suffering and drama of 9/11, all the pressure and intrigue in Goss's role as intelligence chairman, it was his work with everyday people that made life in politics all worth it. People like AIDS-infected Florida teenager Ricky Ray, a hemophiliac who contracted HIV through tainted blood. Goss spearheaded a fund for the families of Ray and people like him, and helped victims of the tainted blood supply get the apologies from the government they so badly wanted.
The finest part of public office, by far the best that ever happens to you, it's when somebody who is a victim or down or hurt or suffering suddenly smiles and says thanks. It doesn't get any better. That's what it's about.
So as night falls on his 16 years in Washington, not to mention Goss's service to his country as both an Army officer and CIA agent, that fresh blood back here at home begins campaigning to fill his shoes. The 14th district seat in Congress is opening up for the first time since hundreds of thousands of people moved here or were even born. And the question on many minds, is Porter Goss really leaving Congress?
I can't imagine anything interfering. And of course, I couldn't imagine 9/11, so you never know. Never say never in politics.
The beautiful music that echoes through the courtyard and the warm faces betrays the cold realities of life post-earthquake. The Hope for Haiti Children's Center is more packed than ever.
After the earthquake, we really felt this would be a good first step for us in our orphan ministry to work with the hundreds of thousands more orphaned, than before the earthquake.
Pastor Brett Furlong of Cape Coral has made a handful of trips to Haiti. On this one, he sees that being an orphan isn't the only challenge for many of the center's children.
Can you tell somebody back in America we need more saline?
The country has to be rebuilt, and so do thousands of its youngest. For many of them, happiness comes in learning to snap your fingers.
You're trying.
On the hand you have left.
The people are the warmest, kindest, appreciative people you'll ever meet. And they're beautiful. They are just wonderful, beautiful people. It's just that their country is not.
Coming to the aid of the orphanages Katiana and Jocelyn, their bodies crushed that day, is prosthetics expert John Sanders of Fort Myers. He joined forces with Brett and Cape Christian Fellowship, part of an army of Southwest Floridians who've rushed to help Haitians who had little before the earthquake and have even less now. This isn't the first time that John and Brett have been to Haiti, and it won't be the last. And it seems that they're treated like heroes when they come to this country. In the case of John, one young man was happier to see him than any of the rest, and with very good reason.
We're going to rebuild his body and his spirit.
On the afternoon of January the 12th, Emergency workers carrying out the dead discovered Jocelyn. The doctors told him they'd be amputating his leg in 3 days. He told them, "I can't wait. Do it now."
Ask him if he has any phantom sensation, that is, that he feels his ankle or his toes.
He said that.
He does. Before John can use his expertise to get the 22-year-old's new leg built back in Florida, he has to cast or measure him for it.
That's it.
The first place he'll walk when he gets his new leg, the chapel, to thank God for John and Brett, men who left the comforts of home to help those who lost theirs, and so much more. We want to get you updated now on the breaking news out here at Southwest Thornton International, which is the forced return of the last flight to depart from the old terminal. It's a flight Condor Air bound for Frankfurt, Germany. It had to turn around because of engine problems. We showed you a plane landing a short time ago. As it turns out, the airport officials have told us now that that was not the flight that is in a bit of distress. That was a scheduled flight, the second to last to land at the old terminal. The actual flight that's having the engine problems is still about 10 to 15 miles out. So, of course, we'll continue to update this throughout the evening and tomorrow morning on NBC2 News Today. Jessica?
2 News.
We have turned the lights out here in the studio for you, but we will continue. As we will remind you, we do the news live. The Lee County Schools took some time out today to recognize their educational support person for the year 2001. Kathleen Cross, a bookkeeper at Colusa Elementary School in the Cape, got the award today. She has worked for the district for 20 years, starting off as a volunteer. Mrs. Cross handles all aspects of the school's budget. She also serves as a mentor for students at Colusa and serves as the assistant director of the Sunset After School program at her school. And she'll always remember, having been on the news the day that the lights went out.
The lights went out.